Listen to any local newscast or check out the headlines in the paper, and whether it's true or not, it feels like multiple gun shootings and other kinds of violence in the urban areas of Hampton Roads is out of control. It's one thing to absorb the news from arm's length, but when the violence is brought to your door, what's happening on our streets takes on a whole new meaning. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee, and up next on Another View, a very personal look at street violence with our roundtable pundits, Roger Chesley, Carol Pretlow, Bill Thomas, and Wil LaVeist. Stay tuned. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. You've seen the headlines. 14 people shot in Norfolk over the 4th of July weekend. Hampton police continued to search for a July 12 shooting suspect. 1 killed and 1 injured in Newport News shooting. Unfortunately, I could go on and on. And then recently, I received an email from one of our Another View listeners that started like this. Yesterday, a well-known professor from Norfolk State was robbed at a stop for a commuter train. And my heart jumped in my throat as she went on to say that it was our very own Carol Pretlow. I'm happy to say that Carol is fine, and she's with us today, along with Roger Chesley, columnist for the Virginian-Pilot. How you doing, Roger?
Barbara, I am well. How are you?
Great, doing great. Carol Pretlow, our favorite professor from Norfolk State University. How are you?
Wonderful.
Great. We're so happy that you're okay. And community activist Bill Thomas is joining us by phone. Hi, Bill.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody.
And author, talk show host, and journalist, Mr. Wil LaVeist. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well and glad to be sitting here next to Carol.
Absolutely. So, Carol, tell last month you all were able to talk a little bit about the violence, but the Immigration Reform Act kind of took over, and it was a great conversation. I really appreciate Lisa sitting in for me. But this issue of guns and violence in our area, I mean, it really struck home for us, our panel, because of what happened to you. Can you tell us about it?
Well, it was a typical summer afternoon for an academic. I was doing research in the research lab, and ironically, I thought, I'm going to get a smoothie, and then I'm going to sit by the water, and I left early, and I was sitting at the light rail station. And I'm thinking in my mind about, the notes I had written, and 2 young men passed by. They were not particularly noticeable. They were not, thuggish. They were just 2 young men walked by. And a few minutes later, one doubled back and asked if he could use my cell phone. And at that moment, I said, oh, my God, I think I left it in the office. And he says, so what you going to do for me? Well, I joke with kids all the time, so I said, I don't know what I can do for you because I don't have anything but my purse. So he said, well, I'll take that. Well, I still thought he was kind of joking, so I handed it to him. And I said, well, since you got my purse, could you give me my passport, my ATM, and my ID, and my credit cards back? And he said, sure, take them. And so he gave me the purse back. I got my wallet out, and I started taking it. And I really thought he was going to joke, lady, be careful or something. Mm-hmm. But then he said, you're too slow. We might have to smoke you. And when he said that, I said, oh, he's serious. And I said, over $6 and some change? And I handed him the purse back. But I think he saw the train coming and I didn't. And when it got up to me, he had walked off from me. And he said, oh, by the way, your cell phone is in your purse. And he threw it to me.
What did you do?
Well, now this is so funny because 2 things were going through my mind. When I got on light rail, immediately I said, oh, my God, I forgot to buy my pass, and they'll charge you $1,500. And I had the 75 cents in my hand, and there was an officer on, and I said, sir, I've just been robbed, and I didn't get a chance to get my pass, but here's the 75 cents. And he said, what did you say? And I said, I didn't get a chance to get the pass. I've been robbed, but here's the 75 cents. And another gentleman was sitting there. He said, lady, I don't think he cares about the 75 cents. You just said you've been robbed. And I said, oh, yeah, I was robbed.
You were in shock, weren't you?
Burying the lead again.
Exactly. exactly.
And Regina Mobley said, who asked for their money, their purse back? But anyway, so the police department, then took over, and it was like, okay, it's over, moving on.
So what's the end of the story? Did they find?
They found the
people?
2 young men, and one of them, they said, had 15 outstanding arrest warrants against him.
Wow.
And the other, they said, had a summons but hadn't shown up to court, which was kind of strange to me, because I said, well, you're surprised. You're summoning somebody, but people who commit crimes aren't caring about your summons. So anyway, the trial tentatively is scheduled for Monday.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So did this make you change your mind about public transportation, about walking around the streets of Norfolk? Anything that you're going to do differently?
It didn't make me change my mind about public transportation, but it did make me aware that we need more protection, and that it starts with city government and it starts with citizen action. And so I didn't even have to really do much, because people at Norfolk State, particularly young students, were coming to me telling me they were talking in their churches, they were beginning in their civic organizations to talk about the realities of crime. But more importantly for me, I thought about the mentorship project, and I looked at these young men and said, somebody needed to reach them before they got to that point, and what can we do in the communities to reach them? And I've been talking to citizens, some on light rail. The day after the incident, I went through the mall and talked to just casual people walking around. I talked to several managers at the mall. And I said, we've got to do something about these young people, and we've got to find them jobs. We've got to mentor them. We've got to help them with the educational process. So all of these things.
Roger, you recently wrote a column about this very thing. About
I wrote a couple of columns. One was about the spate of shootings that took place over the 4th of July weekend. And I was able to get a sit down with Norfolk Police Chief Michael Goldsmith and to talk about what had been going on in the city. And it was weird, because he had recently, in late June, had made a presentation to City Council and had just noted, hey, it seems like the violent crimes in the city are down this year, several percentage points, compared with the same period in 2013. But then the 4th of July weekend came in, and we had those shootings over that weekend, several at a time. And then we had a few homicides that took place, including a double homicide of a man and a woman, where fortunately the baby, their child, was left alone, but they were killed in their own house. And also I did a follow-up column right after that about, what are some possible solutions? And what I've been hearing so much more and more is mentorship, but also, is there something we can do about parenting? Is there something we can do for folks who really want the help to improve them as parents? And, so much of this seems to it really does start in the home. And if we can bolster that, and if we have people who are willing to improve, then that's something that can maybe work.
Let me share some numbers with you all as we continue this conversation. So we heard from several of the 7 majors, which are the cities that we contacted, about their gun violence. Now, that could be homicide or more so just shootings.
Right.
So the city of Norfolk had since, and this is between January 1st and July 29th, so the end of July, Norfolk had 79 shooting incidents, 105 people struck by gunfire, compared to last year's 67 shooting incidents and 84 struck by gunfire. Virginia Beach, they do their numbers a little bit differently, so I'm going to read exactly what they told us. Assault aggravated with a firearm, there were 14 incidents. Assault aggravated domestic with a firearm were 2. Assault aggravated attempted murder with a firearm is 14. And murder, non-negligent manslaughter is 11. So it's a total of 41 people who have come into some kind of gun violence in the city of Virginia Beach in that same time period. In Newport News, there were 50 people injured by gunfire. 13 have been killed by gunfire. And in Suffolk, there were 7 shootings, and one was with a BB gun. They wanted us to make sure we said that. And there have been no murders. And the cities of Hampton, Portsmouth, and Chesapeake declined to respond to our request.
And that's kind of interesting because I think if I recall, just in general, Hampton has had its share of problems this year too. So it's kind of disheartening that they wouldn't just fess up and say this is what our statistics show so far this year.
Because it is the reality. It is what it is. Well, what is up with all these guns on the street? And the really sad part is that it primarily is African Americans killing African Americans.
I think that's pretty much the biggest issue is too many guns on the street because these guns are not legal guns. And so you got too much access to guns on the street. And there needs to be something done there in terms of penalties for having, illegal guns. You see the same issue going on in Chicago, for example, where there's so many guns on the street. Again, legal. We're not talking about legal citizens who have gone through the training and all that. That's totally off the table. So if anybody's hearing that, we're not talking about that. There's got to be greater penalties because a lot of these crimes are spur-of-the-moment crimes or crimes that are being done when people are desperate or high. And, it's much easier to have a massive impact of taking somebody's life when you got an illegal firearm in.
No, but even with Carol's incident and what happened with her, even the language, the young man said, "I'm going to smoke you." I mean, it always goes back to that finality, Bill, that I think, I wonder, do these kids really understand the finality of gunfire and of a gunshot wound?
No, First of all, Carol, I'm so sorry for your incident, and I was just so sad to hear it. But I'm glad you're okay, and you took it like a true champ. So that's why you survived it. Also, thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate you. My good colleague Will just said there's too many guns on the streets, and that's the problem. And we need to have greater penalties. When Carol just mentioned to us in her description of her unfortunate event that one of the guys had how many summons that he had not gone, or how many?
He had been at 15 arrest warrants.
So what greater penalties are going to? And the other guy has just started up his criminal career. So it's the greater penalties. I don't know. My son was kidnapped outside of MacArthur Mall by 3 of these hoods, not young men, criminals, and threatened, taken over to the projects, thrown on the ground with his 3 white friends, and guns placed to their heads, saying that they would be shot dead. And my son at least got up off his feet and said, "You're going to shoot me, but you're going to shoot me standing up like a man." And I'm so proud that he did that. And they end up, these little criminals left him alone, but they went back and scared and terrorized his white friends by taking their driver's licenses and cars and threatening to go to their houses and kill their whole family. So I'm sick of this stuff, and the liberal mumbo jumbo that Will is talking about. It's a bigger problem. We just don't want to face it. These kids are black. There are some whites that are doing this too, but this is a black show. They're criminals. They don't have common decency. Hold
on. Let me get this straight right now, because so many people say that this is not a black show. This is a show that talks about issues that are of primary interest to the black community, but of interest to everybody. Okay. This issue, everybody can get shot. It's, unfortunately, it is a lot more black on black crime, but everybody can be shot. Will?
Yeah, I've got to say something to my colleague, because I actually knew, I've known that's happened to Bill's son. Bill and I have been knowing each other for several years, and I've known this to be the case. So I'm not sure why he calls me saying that there are too many illegal guns on the street and people need to be prosecuted and put away for having illegal guns. That doesn't sound like a liberal statement to me. I'm saying that people who want to legally have firearms have every right under the state and in the federal constitution. They have every right to that. So when you look at what is happening in other cities, like I mentioned, Chicago, which I used to live in, and New York, which I was born and raised in. In New York, they have some very different gun laws than you see in Chicago. And Chicago is actually saying we need more like what they're doing in New York. because and then overall, as you look at again,
What are they doing differently? Do you know?
well, you got much stricter penalties if you got an illegal gun. You're not going to be back on the street in New York. It doesn't mean. And another thing is that we cannot stop crime. Okay, so get that. We have to get away from that saying that we're going to stop this. You can prevent it, and there are things that are in place, such as jobs. Carol's talked.
Yeah.
Roger's talked about that, parenting, all of those things. But you're not going to ever end crime. But there are certain things like getting stronger penalties for these illegal firearms, because these guys that are criminals, they're not buying these guns, getting these guns legally.
That's true.
That's
Roger?
true.
Yeah, and to Bill's point a little bit, look, the issues are interconnected. The fact of a disregard for human life, for values, and the prevalence of guns. Now, let's face it, other weapons, you can still injure somebody, but they don't have the killing capacity that guns do. So the fact that there are so many guns available, the fact that they're around so easily, and the fact that individuals are so willing to use these weapons to do, either for revenge or because they've been dissed or what have you, that is a very, unfortunately, potent and deadly combination. We reported, and not enough, we reported about this young lady who went to a party earlier this year. And somebody was upset because either this was in Norfolk, upset because he wasn't allowed in or was told that he had to leave. He fires shots at the party as people are leaving. So this young lady is killed in the crossfire, 18-year-old. This is craziness. This is madness. And before I had gone on vacation, they still had nobody in custody in that particular case. Look, this is madness. We're killing our own. When I had done the first column last month, 26 people had been shot up to that point in Norfolk that month. All but one had been African Americans. So, I mean, yes, we have to deal with this situation because it affects us disproportionately more than anybody else in the country.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Join our conversation and let us know, what are you doing as an individual? Going back to Roger's column, because I think it's going to take each one of us to make a difference.
Exactly.
So can you talk to us about what you're doing as an individual to make a difference? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Bill, is it up to each of us individually?
Oh, absolutely. It's individual responsibility. It's morals and values. That is what we don't have enough of. It's not that there are too many illegal guns on the street. It's the person who has the gun. And I take quite quick care in making sure that my family's protected. Right after this, my daughter, who is probably the meekest, mildest person in the world, is down there taking gun lessons at the Norfolk gun shop. So, it's because she's going to protect herself. So I don't know. It's maybe I'm too emotionally tied to this. I lived in Park Place, and I saw these horrible murders, and I think Roger's piece was great, and I think he's been on it for a long time and getting on it. But, over the past 20 years, according to FBI statistics, and y'all say that this is just a black problem, 235,000 African Americans have died on American streets with violence. It's not all with guns. And the number that I'm just looking up now, 79,000 most recent years have been black women with domestic violence and other things that are going on. It's well beyond us. It's the solution is real simple to me. Too many of our children are unchurched, and parents aren't putting enough into them. Love and telling them that they care about them. And it's just all of those little basic things is what you have to do. And like Roger said, it's just you see case after case. My secretary right here on campus here, her nephew was shot down while playing in a schoolyard in Newport News. And then what's happening, and I'll be quiet after this, the community will not even turn these killers in. And they know who they are, and none of these cases are solved. And we just got to, praying. I don't even know what to do, to tell you the honest God truth.
Well, to go back to something that you raised earlier, Barbara, when you were saying about the show and that this is not just a black problem. The solutions are multiple. And one of the solutions is to stop talking as if this is some black gene that is creating these crimes. There's a correlation between, if you listen to the experts, the criminologists, the people at our universities who study these things, and you listen to law enforcement, they will tell you there's a correlation between lack of education, lack of job skill readiness, poverty, and crime, and people killing each other. So if you put any human being, regardless of their skin color, your skin color is only about melanin, has nothing to do with any other thing in terms of decisions that you make. If you put a human being in those conditions, you are going to get these results. So we need to stop saying this is it's a black problem. It keeps showing up in this community because, as Roger just said, we are disproportionately poor. We are disproportionately don't have the job readiness skills and all of that. And you pointed out to us earlier about an article I'm sure you're going to get to, CNN, researchers looking at this very issue and finding that both white people and black people who are in this condition exercise the same types of behavior.
Absolutely. And the article that you're referring to is a study that was done by Carl Alexander, who is an Academy professor and sociology research professor at Johns Hopkins University, and Linda Olson, who is a research scientist at the Baltimore Education Research Consortium at the Hopkins Center for Social Organization of Schools. And basically the study, they followed 25 kids in Baltimore, African Americans and whites, who were in poverty situations. And they looked at how race and that poverty really was the bigger issue. The fact that people are poor. There are white people who also live in the hood. And that is a misconception that a lot of people have, but there are. And that the opportunities for economic advancement are different.
Right.
And so when you find yourself in that situation, that may be a problem. Carol, did you want to respond?
Yeah, and I think it's a multiplicity of kind of interrelated things. First of all, of course, it's education, but I keep thinking about poverty and economic foundations. And as we look at the black community, African American community, in the past weeks, I've been talking to people about, well, here's what we can do from the educational, and everybody can't contribute everything. I'm an educator, so that's where
your point.
But business people need to work within the Chamber of Commerce. White businesses downtown get affected too, so work with the Chamber of Commerce, and somehow we all need to pull together and find solutions.
Okay, Roger?
I did want to, I'm going to disagree slightly with Will on this. Yes, it's not just a black problem, but we are the victims more often than not than anybody else in the country. So we have a bigger stake in this, I think. And I want to make sure that everybody thinks that they can play a role in this regardless of their race. But boy, we really got to be involved in this, because we're the ones that are dying and we're the ones that are getting shot at a ridiculous rate.
And we're the ones who always talk about you got to start at home. And since it does affect African Americans, as you said, disproportionately, then we as an African American community need to get busy. Let's go to Sherry in Virginia Beach. Hi, Sherry. You're on the air.
Thank you, Barbara, and greetings to everyone.
Hello.
I wanted to share a solution. The Africana Festival is happening on August 22nd, 23rd, and 24th down at the Virginia Beach oceanfront. And I am bringing cultural programming to that event. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is starting to raise funds for the Ebola crisis and sending those funds to Liberia, which has a direct connection to Norfolk, Virginia, because the first president of Liberia, Joseph Jenkins Roberts, was from Norfolk, Virginia. And so we need to, this history of Hampton Roads, which is basically the birthplace of the American dream, we need to be able to let the people, the young people who live here and older people know the significance of this region's history as a way of empowerment, because we have a responsibility and an opportunity to be able to shape how African American history is understood by the world. In 2019, we will be dealing with the 400th anniversary of the first Africans to join the Jamestown colony. And that celebration needs to be as vibrant and as powerful as what we did in 2007 for the 400th anniversary of Jamestown.
Okay, Sherry, and I don't mean to cut you off, but we've got tons of calls. But the bottom line being that education, again, Carol, to your point, is what's most important. We appreciate your call, Sherry.
I had another related question, and that is based on my experience, and I didn't understand until I started talking to people, and there were people in the community who were saying, why would you keep on talking about this? Why don't you, it's all right to talk about it generally, but why are you personalizing this? And why did you let the media use you? And I said, no, I didn't feel it was being used. I thought it was, okay, let's bring this issue to the forefront, and what can we do? So why do people want to be silent about it?
Bill, would you want to answer that first?
Yeah, I think Carol is. I think we should have a marching band every day in the morning talking about this. You don't talk about it, you can't solve it.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I really don't disagree too much with Will. I just think the tenacity of what we have to do. But one of the things that and people say, well, it's not a black problem. I'm not going to say that. I'm pretty much a scientist. It is a black problem, as I said. That's in my judgment. And we have to deal with this. And it's, if you just looked at the numbers statistically, we have to deal with this. But one of the mistakes that we make, just like the young lady was coming up with trying to help with this disease, we can't stay focused on one thing long enough to fix it from beginning to end. We're off trying to help somebody else before we're helping ourselves. I just think we ought to just focus on this along, and whatever part of it will. I don't care what part we start at. Taking the guns, education, dragging them into churches. I don't know, but I think we ought to just take one solution at a time and take a year or 10 years and just figure out what we should do to get this problem solved.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about guns and violence on our streets and how we can make it stop with Roundtable Pundits, Roger Chesley with the Virginian-Pilot, Carol Pretlow, Professor of Political Science at Norfolk State University, community activist Bill Thomas, and journalist, author, and talk show host Wil LaVeist. Paul joins us from Hampton. Hi, Paul. You're on the air.
How are you doing this afternoon?
Doing great.
Yeah, my whole thing is, have we ever considered the effects that stop and frisk had in New York as far as decreasing the violence and maybe the black community getting behind something that would protect the black community? The whole stop and frisk program, while highly unpopular, would decrease black deaths. But yet people are so caught up on that, well, white people are stopping you that they can't get behind it. And I'd much rather see a black kid harassed on the street by police rather than one being dead in the street.
Okay, thanks so much for that call, Paul. Roger, go
I'm
ahead.
very opposed to anything like that. That was a program that was racial profiling at its worst. A judge came out against the implementation of that program. And what you do is you alienate everybody who is a law-abiding citizen, who is going about his or her business, usually men, but it was disproportionately targeted at Latino and black men. And what you did was you caught up a whole lot of people who now are going to be against the criminal justice system because they were stopped for doing nothing wrong and being frisked.
Paul, let me ask you a question, because you said you wouldn't mind seeing young folks. Would it bother you if you were stopped?
No, it wouldn't.
Okay.
It would not. Now let me just throw one other thing in. I live in Hampton, but I'm in process of moving to Detroit. And what has happened in Detroit over this past spring, rash of home burglaries, home invasions, where law-abiding citizens had weapons and they killed the intruders. That cut that home burglary, home invasion 40% in less than 5 months. Now, I'm saying that along with the whole stop and frisk, and there's got to be something done. We can't keep losing black folks just because you don't want to be harassed. I'd rather be harassed than dead.
Okay, Paul, thanks so much for your call. Well, you were from New York. You stop and frisk?
Yeah, I mean, I've unlike the caller, I'm not in favor of just being stopped and frisked for no reason at all. I'm not fine with that. I think stop and frisk, the intention was in following what a lot of the research recommends. Target the crime, put your efforts in the area where the crime is the most largest. Mm-hmm. So what happened with stop and frisk in a lot of ways, because blacks are disproportionately poor in New York, disproportionately uneducated. They're going to live in areas where the majority of the crime occurs. So it appears as they're coming in, because that's what the researchers recommend that you do, that's why these areas become the areas where you see most of the stop and frisk happening.
But this morning, the police chief for the city of Norfolk was on CBS this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that was asked was, why is it that in New York, there are still more black and brown people arrested for drugs than there are white people, when the research shows that white people use drugs in a disproportionately higher rate? And his response was exactly what you just said. And I couldn't quite, it just didn't feel right to me for some reason. Roger, your reaction.
I've written about that as well, and talked to the police chiefs in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and Chesapeake about this very issue. And one of the issues that came out, one of the reasons that came out, is that sometimes black and brown folks are more open about their drug use than sometimes whites are. Now, this is a broad generalization, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, and if you can get the arrests, you're looking to make arrests, and so you're going to make it sometimes where it's easier. Now, but that also gives you a skewed picture of who's using the drugs in the first place. And let me just get back to one quick thing about the gentleman who was getting ready to move to Detroit. Mm-hmm. I lived in Detroit for about 14 years, and that city is so much different, and some of the problems are so large there than any other cities. Part of the reason why so many people are shooting invaders is because the police department is not getting to
well, they don't
crimes.
even have enough police officers to get to the serious crimes.
So, that is not a situation that necessarily is duplicated here. So I'd be careful about trying to use that as an example for what we should do in Hampton Roads.
Okay, Peter joins us from Smithfield. Hi, Peter, you're on the air.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Here's a way that we can start fixing this afternoon. It cuts across racial lines. It cuts across economic lines. It cuts to the heart of the thing, and that is to begin a campaign to convince these people that snitching saves lives. Snitching saves lives. How many times have the police been told, yeah, I know who did it, but I can't tell you. I'm not snitching. If we could get these victims and the kids in the neighborhoods to realize that snitching saves lives, you could start cutting down this very afternoon.
Okay, thanks so much for your call, Peter. Appreciate that. Let's hear from Bill first, because we haven't heard from him in a while.
Well,
snitching?
I think that's a good idea, but let me get back to my good friend, Will. We give each and every sole citizen, legal or illegal, a free 13-year education. But I almost like folks ought to say now, you people you can't get educated. You won't. I mean, what else do you want? You could put a schoolhouse up in some of these apartments or apartments, and the people still wouldn't go to school. I mean, it's more than that. It's about you having pride in yourself and pride in your community, and you have shame for what you do and what you don't do. I mean, when are you going to, Will, my good dear friend, put individual responsibility on the backs of the black community that refuses our preachers and priests that are black, especially some of our TV reporters, and they don't bring this stuff up. All they want to do is show these black people getting killed, and they don't want to really talk about the real issues. And as Carolyn said, they don't even want her to talk about it. Will, I'm just at a loss. You get 13 years of free education. You don't go to school. You don't obey your parents. You don't go to church or your synagogue or whatever else. And then you expect me to put up with this indecency? I don't understand it.
Well, Bill is still thinking in the mindset that the reason why these people are doing this is because they're black. You just finished quoting a research from Johns Hopkins. That's the top research institution in our nation. On the planet. One of the top on the planet.
Of the top.
Okay, I allowed you to talk. I allowed you to talk.
Wait. One at a time, Bill.
See, and this is what happens.
Let him talk.
This is what happens. We're afraid to hear what we're actually saying. Their research just said it's not about the melanin in the skin. It's about the conditions and how people, right? When he talks about personal responsibility, the white people in this study have to have an issue with personal responsibility. So it's a human issue. And that's what my only point is. And we keep coming back to this mindset. It's a black gene. It's a black problem. No, it's a human problem. So you should be asking yourself, why is it that blacks are disproportionately poor, disproportionately uneducated? What is going on in this country that one particular group seems to be disproportionately in this situation when if you put anybody in this situation, they behave exactly the same? So why is it that one group, nobody's answering that question?
I can answer it.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm not poor. You're not poor. Roger's not poor. Carol and Barbara, we're doing what we have to do. We're not uneducated. What happened in our households that are not happening in these other dysfunctional, messed up households? I think that's the better question.
Oh, well, let's see. Let's see if David has an answer. Hi, David. You're joining us from the Eastern Shore. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Nice to hear you. I really enjoy your show. Try to listen to it as often as possible.
Thank you.
I'm enjoying all different viewpoints there. Just let you know, I'm not African American, but I grew up in Hampton, Norfolk, and Virginia Beach, and I'm in my 50s, and it seems like the problem has been in the African American community as far as trying to settle things more with violence, and the values being some kids their shoes or phones more than a life or more than their education. I don't exactly understand where that comes from because I'm not in that community. I am an educator, so I see students in the schools, but there's a difference. It seems like violence comes first, got to be tough. I don't know if it's the upbringing. I grew up, I hear the arguments from some of your guests there that, I knew poor white people and poor African-American folks, and it just seemed like the way to solve problems were a little bit different.
Okay, let's get a response.
It didn't come straight to the gun.
Let's get a response from our panel then. Thanks, David, for the call. We appreciate it. You want to respond, Will?
Again, I'll go back to that study. What they said in the study was if you take black person, uneducated, didn't get a high school diploma, white person, uneducated, didn't get a high school diploma. Mm-hmm. What do they say in that study? They say that the uneducated white person has a much better likely opportunity to end up employed, still being able to take care of a family, be married, all of those things. Mm-hmm. So the question should be, why is it that if you take these two same people, same conditions, poverty, why is it that one group is still able to move forward and have a chance? Could it be because that's how we perceive that this other group is the problem? That's what he just said. He said it seems to be in this community. The research is saying if you put both people in the same conditions, one group still has better outcomes. Why is that? And they were saying that the white kid, uneducated, no high school, he gets a job during the summer.
Yep. And
he gets the summer job. He's getting the summer job.
He
the
gets
summer
the
job is crucial to getting the full-time job. So if these kids that approach Carol, right? Mm-hmm. If they're at a job site, are they going to approach Carol asking her for a purse for $6?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead, Bill. Well, go ahead, Roger.
Well,
hold on, Bill. Go ahead, Roger.
I would argue that maybe they could have jobs and they would still approach Carol. I mean, there's something inside of yourself that says what is ethical, what is moral, what you should do.
Is that a black thing?
And I don't. That's not a black thing.
Thank you.
But I am concerned that so many of us seem to be caught up in so much criminality. I am concerned about that. And secondly, I did want to mention. I talked to Lori Crouch, a spokesperson for the city of Norfolk, earlier today. Their ongoing programs trying to do something. They're always trying to come up with something. One of the things they're going to be doing in a couple of weekends is a shoot hoops, not guns tournament that's going to combine a police officer with young men from the community. And this is just one of the things that they're trying to do. They're looking for all sorts of ways to make the situations, make the relationships better between the police department and the community. Mm-hmm. So that's something that they're trying to do one of our ongoing efforts that they're trying to do.
And there's another event also, the Youth Board of the Lindenwood Cottage Heights Baroud Park Civic League. They're doing their first youth event called Tied to a Brighter Future, and that's next Saturday, August the 16th from 9:30 until 1, and it's free, and it's for young men ages 14 to 18. Everyone will get a free tie. They're doing breakfast, they're doing lunch, they're doing workshops. The key is getting the people out there. Keenan, you joining us from Williamsburg. How are you?
Good. How are you today?
Great. What's your comment?
Far too much for the time period given, but I appreciate everybody's opinion. This could easily turn into a day-long discussion to even just lay out all the issues, not even talking about solutions. But I don't know if I heard anyone talk about the historical context, because in my opinion, African Americans in the United States of America unfortunately have never even come close to full citizenship, let alone economic parity. And of course, we're not even going to talk about the need for a complete overhaul of the one-size-fits-all agrarian age educational system that still exists in this country. But I think that just if you guys could speak to the notion or the history that, to me, created a perfect storm. What you had is the beginning of the obsolescence of men, uneducated or unskilled men, and their ability to obtain work and raise families and move into the middle class just by getting a blue-collar job, that then becoming obsolete beginning in the 60s, and combined with the introduction of welfare and removing the men from the home, and then also the final factor of knowing, just like Will stated with the study, what happens in poverty. When you combine those two factors with, and you talk about what happens, what people do when they're forced into these situations, they're going to begin to engage in very negative behaviors, i.e. self-medicating, i.e. the drug trade, using, selling, and what have you. And then you have the drug wars, and it's just a perfect storm for destruction of a group of people, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Keenan, for your opinion from Williamsburg. We appreciate that. Will?
I mean, he spoke to it historically. Yeah. He just laid it out. And so, again, I think his point about how people behave when they're under stress, think about all of us individually, as successful as we are. Do you make better decisions when you're under stress, or do you make better decisions when you're calm? You can see. So there's research that shows when you are under poverty, when you are under stress, your decision-making ability is much different than someone who is not. So he laid it out. Just a quick quote from this study. Okay, it talked about clearly there were disadvantages for African Americans. By contrast, only 15% of African Americans, when men worked in these sectors, the ones that he talked about, industrial, and even within the small group, annual earnings were less than half that of whites, $21,000 a year compared to $43,000. Why is it? Uneducated, no high school degree, you can still get a trade and earn $43,000 if you're a white male, and only 21? So, of course, the guy's 21, and now you made these bad decisions. Now you got 4 or 5 baby mamas. Wow. And this and that and the other.
I knew Bill was going to go off on that.
That was a special one for Bill.
I know. Wow. Go ahead, Bill.
Wow.
Go ahead,
My
Bill.
brother,
Exactly.
The young man who was just on the telephone probably said it best when you could talk about this forever. Will, I think you and I need to probably sit down and talk about this. And here's the reason. Stress, I agree with you. Stress will make you make poor decisions. No question about it. We've been stressed before. We've been even under more stress than our grandparents and great-grandparents and all the legacy of African Americans. But today, I'm stressed, so I go out and rape and have babies, or not rape, but just have sex with women that I have no interest in and have them, or I go shoot somebody. Well, it's all about the human spirit and the dignity. I understand this. Then let me correct you on something else. Even Johns Hopkins, as great as there can be, there are institutions of color that are just as good and can do just as well. But to get back on that is the fact that we are better people than this.
Lincoln University, Pennsylvania.
We are a
the
better
Lincoln
people.
University.
I agree with
Excellent institution.
Okay.
Howard and Norfolk State as well. But what I'll say
Don't
is,
forget Bennett. But anyway.
we are
And Fisk. Don't forget Fisk.
and Howard.
We're taking
And
this off
Texas
on these
Southern.
tangents. We all know this.
But what I'm saying is, Will, we are better people. We have to do something different. And then maybe I really would like the chance. I'm going to do this. I'll do it publicly. I'd just like to sit down with you for maybe an hour or two and talk about this, really, because this is frustrating me so much. I don't even want to talk about it anymore.
Oh, my
I'm just
goodness.
so fed up with it.
Well, absolutely. Let's do that.
I love black people. I love black people so bad. Ask my son when he got confused for a couple of times. I love black folks. But we have to solve this. It is a black problem, and I think Roger pointed it out and did it more eloquently than I'm saying it, but it is a black problem. We have to do something to fix it.
Carol?
Yeah, Bill, I think you said something very telling to me, because we've all talked about the characteristics, but we aren't talking about the solutions. And so what we need to do, educational institutions from K through graduate
College.
school need to say, okay, here's the problem, here's what we can do. Churches, what can you do in your community? Civic organizations, what can you do? Each incrementally, and maybe taking little bits of this instead of looking at it at the gigantic whole.
Okay.
I have a couple solutions.
You have some solutions?
Yeah.
Okay, let me get Chris on the line
Sure.
first, and then we'll come back to your solutions. Chris is joining us from Norfolk. Hi, Chris. You're on the air.
Hi. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points, poverty and education and everything. But back to the original subject, the crime, the violent crime and everything. I feel like these people thrive because they're not paying rent. They don't have jobs, and that's because I guarantee you they come from, they're living in Section 8 housing, public housing, their grandmothers, their mothers, whoever. And, with that free passage and that place to hide, that's allowing, these things to happen. And, they're restricted from it once you're an adult, once you graduated high school or reach a certain age. And I think they're just really adding to the problem in these communities.
Okay, Chris, let's let the panel react. We only have a little bit of time, and I do want to say, as the vice chair for Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing, I don't want to paint a picture that everybody who lives in public housing is breaking the law, because it is not true. Everyone who lives with Section 8 is called housing choice vouchers does not mean that you're a deadbeat. There are people in our community who are poor, and they are doing the best that they can. So I just want to make sure that we don't walk away with the perception that it's that widespread. Go ahead, Roger.
I really do think more than anything else, it gets back to what are the values that are being implemented in young people as they grow up. You can't really start with somebody. I know Bill has talked about this before. You can't start with somebody who's 22 and he would just get rid of them and all like that. But I mean, it's like a plant. Now, if you're fertilizing and watering that plant and tending to it, and a storm comes and it knocks it out, but you put it back, that is basically what our young children are. And you and I know that we can see certain individuals and we say, boy, that young child has a lot going against it. And that young child has a lot of nurturing and has a lot of seeding and feeding and weeding going on. And, a lot of it comes down to the parents. And if parents aren't stepping up and doing their jobs, it makes it tougher for that child and for everybody else.
And for the rest of the community. Go ahead, Will. You had some solutions.
Yeah, quickly, Barbara, your point was exactly right. I grew up in public housing in Brooklyn, New York. Tilden houses, one of the most notorious projects. I did okay. All of my brothers and sisters at least had master's degree. We did fine, and a lot of us did. So it also drives to my point. Let's stop identifying it's their problem, this person. No, it's a human problem. So one of the solutions, delay having children until you are financially able to take care of them. That's one. Marriage, and preferably under marriage, because marriages reconnect people to communities. You get connected to a community, you feel vested in a community, you buy a home in a community, you're going to care about what's going on in your community. Get a solid K through 12 education. Bill was talking about that. That should include a trade job, so that while you're coming through, before you're graduating, you have some kind of skill that's probably marketable in the job market. Get a solid higher education. We got a lot of kids that are going to school and they're coming out right. Yeah, absolutely. Churches and organizations should be involved in supplementing education, be it after school programs, weekend programs, because we know if we're teaching kids to just memorize for tests, they're not being taught how to think, how to problem solve. We need more of that. We can look at public boarding schools. You got dysfunctional families. Bill has talked about that. We've all talked about that. You got dysfunctional family going to a school, they're being educated, then you send them back home to a dysfunctional family. They're going to forget what they learned from 8 to 3.
We have to also not be afraid to reach out to that dysfunctional family.
And that's another point.
Exactly.
When we talked about earlier about we need to do something in terms of rules and something going on in terms of valuing parenting more, we need to put more of those resources towards, look, if we got a dysfunctional family, let's work with that family to be able to understand why it's important to raise a child and that you're contributing to the community. You're either going to be somebody's going to be a giver to the community, or they're going to be a taker. And that taker is going to be standing in front of someone like Carol Pretlow on a metro station.
Okay, we've only got about a minute and a half left, I think, if my math is correct, Danny. So, Bill, let's start with you. Give me your one thing that you want people to walk away with from this conversation today.
No, they can walk away with the fact that I'm at war with this now. I'm going to be very public. I am not going to listen to anybody who's not on a different plane of doing things differently. I understand clearly to wipe out an epidemic, you must first eliminate the cause. And you'll see and hear a lot more from me in a very active way to contribute, put my time and effort into making some changes and to knocking down some doors.
Okay, and congratulations also to you, Bill, for being on the front page of the Daily Press. Huge article on you, so if you haven't had a chance to read it, audience, check it out. Will, real quickly, we're running almost out of time.
Another thing is you got Bobby Scott, who has been trying to get legislation passed for I don't know how many years, the Youth Promise Act. Again, there are researchers and legislators that know what it would take to prevent crime. Put the resources into that.
Okay, Carol?
Starts with you. Think about what you can do. One little thing. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. What you can do and do it.
Okay, and Roger?
Let's boost parents who are really trying to do better and who want the help. It's our responsibility. It starts in the home.
Okay, I agree with all of that. Thank you all very much, Roundtable. I really appreciate your being here. And we've been talking about ways to stop the violence. Let me remind you again about the event called Tide to a Brighter Future. It happens next Saturday, August 16th from 9:30 until 1 at Lindenwood Elementary School. It's from young men ages 14 to 18. There'll be breakfast, lunch, workshops, door prizes, and all attendees will receive a necktie. The event is free, but you have to register online. So call 390-5278. The event is sponsored by the Youth Board of Lindenwood, Cottage Heights, and Baroud Park Civic League. And you can also find out information at anotherviewradio.org. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Thanks to Danny Epperson of Hearsay with Kathy Lewis fame for sitting in for Lisa Godley. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Jasmine Strong answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone. Let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.